I'm Mako, Global Director of Operations here at WiredScore. So I oversee our operations teams that are essentially think of us as the execution arm of the certification globally. So when our clients are signing up their projects for certification, my team engages with the project team from the landlord and from the developer to assess all of their individual building components against our scorecard and against our criteria to issue a certification. So Phil will tell you a bit more about kind of the scale and growth here, but yeah, it's a global organization that we are working with landlords in almost every market.
Yeah, and hey everyone, Phil Kanfer. I'm a principal at WiredScore, oversee business development for the company. Was the second employee to help build out our business in North America when we started this 7.5 years ago. So happy to talk to you guys a little bit about this. We have a couple of different products that we've launched. WiredScore, as Brad mentioned, with the analogy, kind of think of this a little bit like LEED, but for technology and telecommunications, which I think is just the easy way to think of this. So we started this on the office side, which is what we've been focusing on for the past 7.5 years. About a month ago, we launched the world's first smart building certification, which is really, really exciting, called SmartScore, which is what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today. And in less than 4 weeks, we're actually launching our first multifamily certification called WiredScore Home, which is really, really exciting. So we got a few different products which we're excited about. Want to tell you a little bit about the SmartScore product. So I'm going to take you through this. John is going to take you through all the technicals in terms of what we're scoring upon and why, and then we could definitely open it up to question and answer for sure. Just if I could share my screen, which I should be able to. All right, can everybody see this?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. Okay, so a little bit on us. So WiredScore, we are the global benchmark for digital connectivity. We started this 7.5 years ago in New York City, actually in partnership with Mayor Bloomberg and the NYC Economic Development Corp to solve a major problem, which was a massive lack of transparency that existed in the marketplace. Tenants were flocking to New York City from Seattle, San Francisco. They're having a really, really hard time understanding how well connected the office stock was. And there was no transparency that existed in the marketplace. So WiredScore came to solve that problem, create a mechanism that everybody could use to understand and identify the best connected buildings in the market, so that people can honestly just make better and more informed decisions. So we started this in 2013. As you see, to speed up to today, we're actually now in 10 countries. Which is really, really exciting. After about 2 years of doing this in New York, a lot of the owners in New York City were really, really excited about this, and it kind of resonated not only across the US, but internationally. We got a call from the city of London in 2015 and said, listen, we see what you're doing. We're really, really interested in it. We'd love for you to bring your certification out into our market. Of course, we said yes. And as you see, 2017, 2019, 2020, 2021, we've continued that expansion. This slide here is a little outdated, but we've now certified over 700 million square feet in over 160 cities. My favorite part of this slide is that we have over 700 clients. So over 700 unique real estate organizations are working with us, and we've now certified over 3,000 buildings, which for me really tells that I honestly think that we and our team have better insight into what best-in-class technology looks like. Better than anyone else in the world. Here's a view of our clients. Everyone from the Blackstones of the world, the Beacon Capitals, the Hines, Nuveen, all the top 10 largest owners in the US are currently working with us, which is really, really exciting. Additionally, we're learning daily about what the smartest and the most sophisticated owners are doing and what they're implementing into their buildings. And that insight has been incredibly helpful and valuable to our partners, right? To be able to go to an owner and say, listen, we know exactly, what the class A++ owners are doing, the Blackstones, the Hineses, the Oxfords, to really help them frame their thinking and to get an understanding of what we should be implementing is invaluable to our clients at the end of the day. So that's a little bit of background on us and our traction and kind of where we are right now. So technology is redefining real estate. In my opinion, buildings are turning into computers with roofs on them. And I think if 2020 taught us anything, it's that technology is driving decisions more so now than at any time in the history of real estate. I was on the phone recently with one of the largest owners of real estate in Chicago who said, listen, if you don't have your arms around health and well-being, sustainability, and connectivity, you're just completely behind the 8-ball. And I think it's fair to say that the industrial sector and the retail sector have really seen the effects of what technology can do to real estate. And I think it's the office sector that's now here front and center that's going to bear the brunt of that. But I also think that there's some caution associated with that. I think there's more danger now spending money badly on technology than there is spending no money at all. And if you don't do it with the right processes in mind and with the right values in mind, I think you can end up in a position very quickly where you're faced with incredibly expensive retrofits and renovations, and an office product that you've made obsolete by really making poor capital decisions. And that's what we're really looking to address through the SmartScore program. So why now? This started really as a result of our clients questioning SMART and bringing it to the table, along with our own intuition. People were coming to us and saying, look, I'm hearing a lot about SMART. We want to spend money in this area, and we're under pressure to do so based on tenant expectations, but we really don't know what we're doing or really where to start. I'm someone who before the pandemic was traveling across the country and going to listen to different conferences and listening in on different panels. And there was just 1,000 different definitions of what a smart building is. And that was complicated. So if there isn't a joined up approach, if people can't agree on to what a smart building is, then how do you plan for it, right? And it makes it very, very, very complicated. So when we first set out on this mission, we found that there were 3 main questions that needed addressing. One is, what's a smart building? 2 is, how do you actually implement SMART? And then, of course, how do you demonstrate ROI, right? So number 1, like, what's a smart building? As I mentioned, owners just haven't had this joined up approach, and there's 1,000 different definitions. And without that joined up approach, it's really hard to make decisions, which ultimately I think creates a knowledge gap between what SMART might be, in theory, and then actually how to put it into practice. The second question was really, how do you implement SMART? And with that knowledge gap, like, how do I do so? Where do I start? Where do I finish? Who do I need to help me do this? What's my blueprint? And that's what we set out to create through SmartScore. And then ultimately, how do you demonstrate ROI? At the end of the day, you're going to have to demonstrate ROI because these things cost a lot of money. And you need to show that it's going to pay you back in tenant appreciation, rents, or asset performance. So the way we set up to answer all these questions we were getting on SMART was to set up a SMART Council, our SMART Council. So the WiredScore SMART Council was set up to, as you see, to provide clarity, leadership, and guidance on what constitutes a smart building in this ever-evolving world. And what you see on the screen here is our council members and also our research advisors. So we got some of the most forward-thinking owners out in the marketplace, the Rudins of the world, the Hineses, the John Bucks, the Edges, and some of our research advisors, the WSPs of the world, the Ciscos, the ACOM, to really help us understand what does a smart building look like, which is similar in capacity to when we started WiredScore 7.5 years ago. We got the head of Google Fiber, a Cisco executive, a bunch of landlords, some ISPs to get in the room and to help us understand, what does a best-in-class technology building look like? So these are the people, and these are our thought partners that John and our team met with to help understand what does best-in-class look like from a smart building standpoint, and then how do we define it? So why do smart buildings matter? Here are some graphics that show the importance of this to the tenants that occupy your buildings or the tenants that you want to ultimately occupy your buildings. Again, those of you who are landlords on the phone or those of you who are advising those landlords, these are the graphics and these are some of the stats that they're standing behind. So I'm going to go through some of them. And by the way, these stats are global in nature just because we're a global company. So you might see EMEA on here, which is not just US, but we're taking Europe into account. So 21% of EMEA occupiers are now prepared to pay a rental premium of over 20% for tech-enabled smart buildings. 40% of smart buildings, 40% of buildings with smart technology are at risk of cyber attack. 88% of occupiers intend to increase the technology investment to support a greater prevalence of home working, right? The way we use the office, it's going to change. And for it to be a viable and productive part of your working system, money needs to be spent and invested in the technology side of things. And it's not just tech, right? 70% of employees said sustainability would impact their decision to stay with a company. 87% of employees want their current employer to offer a healthier workspace, right? Sustainability and well-being are only going to become more important in terms of the conversations that you're going to have and the owners are going to have with tenants. And if anyone on the design or MEP side of things that you're going to have with tenants, that owners are going to have with investors, and that everyone in the ecosystem is going to have with the brokerage community. And the people who work for the companies that occupy these buildings care about sustainability and their own health and well-being more so now than they ever have been before. And owners need to make sure that their office is a product that supports their wishes, because the people who are the tenants want to be able to attract the best people to the best workspace, right? And to stand a chance of competing, we're seeing that owners really need to offer exactly that. So who do smart buildings matter to? There's three stakeholders on here that we see are the most important for who this matters to at the end of the day, right? From an investor standpoint, investors have begun asking questions in this arena. They want to know that the people who are managing their money are engaged with the latest trends in real estate, right? They want to make sure that not only are their buildings future-proofed, but their dollars are future-proofed. From a tenant side of things, like tenants expect their buildings to be smart and adaptable to enhance their experiences in the building. And number three, it's now the landlord's responsibility to manage and deliver it, right? Like gone are the days where you hand over the keys to that tenant and the tenant goes about their business and they're gone for the next 10 years. Like real estate has turned into an experiential thing because we don't have to be in the office right now. We're going to choose to be in the office. So these are the three stakeholders that we're seeing smart buildings matter to the most. So, okay, what actually is a smart building? We're seeing a smart building is one that it's a better building because it's more cost efficient. It's more sustainable. It's more inspiring to current and prospective tenants, and it's future-proof from the point of view of design. And our overall definition is that a smart building is one that delivers outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed their evolving expectations. And I'm just going to read that one more time. A smart building is one that delivers outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed their evolving expectations. And the reason why I read that twice is the word users here, right? We designed this for the users in the real estate building. That could be the property manager, the investor, the tenant, the broker, the landlord. When we designed the scorecard, it was user-centric. The scorecard is ultimately split into two halves, which John is going to speak to next. It's split between user functionality and technological foundation. And for us, really, as I mentioned, a user is anyone who's a stakeholder in the building. Again, it could be yourself, it could be an investor, a property team, a leasing team, your tenants. And the user functionality piece addresses why the building in question is better for the people who work in it, right? Smart as a concept, I think it's a bit abstract and it could be intimidating when we talk about it. Being able to make sure that there are human benefits to having invested in making your building smart makes it real and makes it valuable. So I'm going to turn this now to John, who's going to take you through our scorecard and help you understand, or not our scorecard, but help you understand what we measure and what we're looking at through the SmartScore certification. John, over to you.
Cool. So yeah, as Phil mentioned, it's broken out into two sections: user functionality and technological foundations. As Phil touched on, user functionality is really about the user stories that a building is delivering for all the users. So for sustainability, that means not just facilities management, but the tenant's real estate team. For health and well-being, it means not just the employees of the tenant, but the building staff as well. I'll touch on the individual categories of this in a little bit more detail, but it's important to note how we actually allocate credit. So one of the biggest challenges for landlords is really trying to find the balance between what they can do as a developer or owner within their base building areas and what they can enable for tenants. Historically, we've seen this as kind of a point of friction. We've got a lot of examples of buildings like the Edge in Amsterdam, where you have a single occupant taking up an entire building. We're able to do all these really exciting and unique things using digital technology. But when you apply that to a multi-tenant office building with 5 different core tenants with different needs, different wants, it becomes really hard for an owner to kind of get their arms around smart as a concept and from an implementation standpoint. So what we're looking at here from a credit standpoint is basically, what are you as the owner for these different user stories delivering for your base building areas? And then on the other end of that, what are you enabling for tenants? So how easy is it for me, the tenant, to come in and get a really good experience from a sustainability standpoint, a really good ability to gather data for air quality from a health and well-being standpoint? That's kind of the crux of our user functionality, where we really want to break out, what, as you, the landlord, are you delivering for all the users of the building, and what is enabled for tenants when they're actually coming in utilizing digital technology. So if you go to the next slide, Phil, I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. So user functionality is broken out into 6 subcategories. The first is individual and collaborative productivity. This really touches on everything from all of the visitor experience in the building, removing that daily friction for users that are coming to the building, for guests that are coming to the building. How easy is it for them to check in and out of the building? The ability to wayfind through the building. So where are you in relation to the amenities in the building? So real-time wayfinding. Meeting room booking. How easy is it for you as an employee, a tenant employee, to book meeting rooms? Can you do that, based on a schedule? Can you do that based on live occupancy? So the level of sophistication behind that user story is really key to how we actually allocate credit against it. Person locating is also a part of this. So everything from being able to see where a user is in the building based on their typical schedule, to blue dot functionality, where you're actually seeing in real time where your team is within the building for collaboration purposes. From a health and well-being standpoint, this is kind of all-encompassing, especially in light of everything that's happening in the world today. This is first and foremost for a lot of our clients, a lot of our landlords. This covers the different information and features to enable tenants in the building to both feel like they're working in a healthy environment and also adjust that environment and tailor it to their working preferences. So everything from information on what is the indoor air quality of the building on a daily basis, what is it historically over time, how can I, the user, actually adjust my individual working space to my preferences. So everything from tailoring your lighting to your HVAC to your typical working flow on a daily basis. Building cleanliness is also a part of this. So understanding, what the building's cleaning schedules look like, how clean are the different spaces throughout the building based on occupancy. Those are all things that we're now seeing landlords prioritize, implement to make all employees feel much more comfortable coming back to work. From a communities and services standpoint, this is something that we're seeing, historically before COVID was really top of mind for landlords, and we think it's going to accelerate even further, in the terrain ahead. This is typically delivered through, tenant engagement applications. So, giving the employees of the building and tenants within the building access to all of the building services, information on local businesses, all the way through to amenity booking, and getting, being able to give the building staff feedback to ensure that, over time, the property is actually, optimizing to the preferences of the users. We see this as kind of a point of contention oftentimes. A lot of times we'll see a landlord roll out a tenant engagement app without actually asking the tenants of the building, what functionality do you actually want from this as a digital tool to enable you to interact with the environment around you? Simply by asking for feedback, you can have a much more tactical approach to programming your community and services for the users of the building. And again, that's often delivered by tenant apps, but doesn't need to be. Additionally, if you go to the next slide, Phil, we've got categories around sustainability, maintenance and operations, safety and security. Sustainability is really about providing tenants and building operators with accurate data on energy usage, trends over time, information on the different energy sources that are being utilized to deliver a sustainable building. This also includes the ability for the building systems to self-optimize, for users to have some level of control over their utility usage on their floors. And it's really just, the crux of this is, using digital technology to enable all of these different outcomes. So this isn't necessarily looking at the building materials that are utilized in the way that LEED does, but we're looking at the digital technology that supports, how energy efficient the building is and how optimized it is over time. From a maintenance and operations optimization standpoint, this is really touching on the whole of the building systems and technology that's essentially managing them. The goal here is to have a building operations system that is highly efficient, that takes into account both space utilization, information on maintenance costs within the building, and make that really accessible information for the tenant real estate teams and the tenant facility management teams to differentiate the asset from a maintenance and operations standpoint. For safety and security, this is kind of your typical building, everything from typical building access control. How smooth is that process for the users of the building? Is that frictionless? Can I enter hands-free? But from a facilities management standpoint, it also takes into account who's actually visiting the building, when are they visiting the building, what areas are they accessing, to ensure that you've got a really strong handle on how the building is used, how it's accessed, for those tenant teams to feel really, really safe and secure when they're signing a lease in the building. So user functionality, again, it's broken out into these 6 categories. Within these categories, we're looking at the different user stories that are delivered for all users of the building. We're looking at the areas that it's delivered, so base building and enabled within tenant spaces. And we're looking at the technology level. So for something like building access control, the simplest implementation of that, might just be key card access with data behind that via a visitor management system. The most sophisticated implementation of that is typically something that's mobile, hands-free, and tenants have the ability to integrate with that onto their floors utilizing an API without a major lift to enable those user stories within their space and into their floors, not just the base building areas. So if you look at the user functionality section, is really the outputs of the scorecard, all the things that the users will receive and be able to touch and feel on a daily basis. The technological foundation section is really the inputs. So this is the underlying technology and policies that are in place to really serve as the building blocks for a smart building. So connectivity, Phil, if you want to go to the next slide, I could just touch on them in more detail. This is really kind of the core, we feel to a strong technological foundation platform is just reliable tenant digital connectivity. You can't be in a smart building with poor internet connectivity, poor wireless services for tenants, or unreliable connectivity, with frequent outages. So here we're looking at your choice of fiber and fixed wireless service providers. We're looking at physical diversity of tenant connectivity routes. Again, back to reliability. The average business today, an hour of downtime from a telecom standpoint is typically $300,000 per hour, and that number accelerates depending on what type of business you are. So it's really key to ensure that you've got the ability to have physically diverse services to enable that reliable connectivity experience over time. Wi-Fi in common areas is, may seem simplistic, but again, back to that, seamless connectivity experience throughout the building. That's kind of a core pillar of that experience for tenants. From a building system standpoint, we're looking kind of all encompassing here at how the building system topology is laid out, how it's managed, and how all those systems integrate with one another. So looking to see if the building has a building systems asset register where all of their different building systems and subsystems are categorized and managed and recorded in a way that's very easily adapted and potentially enables tenants to integrate that much easier by having that information very well documented. We're looking at the building systems operations platform. This can be a building automation system or a BMS, but it can also be a cloud-based analytics platform that enables that same command control, but potentially using a little bit lighter touch from a software and hardware standpoint. Key to this, and I think we mentioned it at the beginning of the call, just kind of talking through the concept of this group. Building systems interoperability is kind of core throughout the scorecard, but in this category is where we're really looking at how do all those subsystems interact with one another, and how easy is it for I, the tenant, to come in and actually implement the technology I need to in my space, while also integrating with the building's overall platform. From a landlord integration network, this is really kind of the nuts and bolts that support that connectivity. Typically, we see this as a base building converged network, leveraging common protocol like IP. There's lots of different ways to slice this now. We see some owners rolling out private LTE networks to serve as this integration network, where they're essentially using CBRS spectrum, which is newly available over the last 2 years, to serve as that foundational bedrock of connectivity throughout the building and enable them to connect all of their building systems to that network. So this is really where the designers of the building can really come in and ensure that you really are putting in a flexible backbone, flexible infrastructure to enable you to not just deliver today, but grow and adapt to different changing preferences over time and new technology as it becomes available. On the flip side of that, if you go to the next slide, Phil, is really kind of the more policy-centric frameworks and strategies that need to be in place to really deliver on a smart building for tenants. So governance is around whether or not the building has a smart building strategy in place. It seems kind of simple. You would think that if you're investing in smart technology, you have a strategic approach to it, but that's not always the case. Typically, we see a lot of landlords investing in technology for technology's sake, without actually understanding, what impact does that have on the outcomes of the building over time, and how can you actually tie those different in-building technology initiatives together to really maximize that output for the end user. So just ensuring that a building actually has a smart building strategy in place is step one. The flip side, taking that a little bit further, is that functionality integration guide for users. So you may invest in all the bells and whistles from a tenant engagement standpoint, from a building operations systems standpoint, but unless you make that really easy for tenants to understand, on a 15-minute leasing tour, really easy for the tenant real estate teams to interact with when they're actually signing a lease and looking to plan their technology deployment within their space, it's kind of a fruitless effort. So just ensuring that you have that guide in place to help actually display, how the tenant would come in and actually, leverage all the excellent technology investments that the landlord has made. And then smart functionality effectiveness. This is really just around programming with your tenants and understanding what their needs are, getting feedback from them to, effectively shape that smart building strategy over time and ensure that your roadmap is continuously evolving to those evolving user expectations. Cybersecurity is obviously top of mind throughout the industry right now. Here we're looking through the policies the building has in place. We're looking through the implementation of those policies across the landlord integration network and building systems, and then taking that one step further, looking to ensure that buildings are actually conducting proactive cybersecurity penetration testing and cybersecurity assessments to ensure that they don't have any blind spots over time. And then something that is typically, overlooked, but just ensuring that you have if you're investing in all this technology to collect all the data within the building, and you want to harness that data to optimize performance over the time, you really need to ensure that you have a policy around how that data is going to be used, who can access it, and what information you're actually going to be leveraging from the users of the building. So this is something that often comes up very late in the leasing process and can cause a lot of issues. So ensuring that you, the landlord, have a proactive approach to a user data policy is key. And then also just ensuring that from an implementation standpoint, you've got the ability to aggregate that data in a very structured and streamlined way. So using one of the common data ontologies to structure your data to really be able to harness that in a meaningful way, and also make that available to the tenants. Tenants obviously want to optimize their space just as much as the landlord does. And if you have the ability to really transfer that data to them, we see this happening more and more now with occupancy data, where landlords are leveraging that to actually help tenants make more informed decisions around their real estate, potentially switching from a fairly rigid layout of their office to a hot desking environment, using that data to really power that decision-making process for the tenant. So I know that's a lot, and that's kind of the helicopter flyover version of this. So depending on where a building scores, we have essentially 4 different levels of certification. So we have got SmartScore certified, silver, gold, platinum. So depending on the level of sophistication of both the technological foundation and the number of user stories and user categories that are delivered, we'll allocate one of these categories. So we have a 1 to 100 scoring system. Each section of our scorecard has more than enough criteria to get max credits on it, because you'll see a lot of those user stories might not be applicable to every building. Not every building has a lot of amenity areas. Not every building has e-mobility charging. So we've got a scorecard that's basically flexible enough to be able to be applied to any building, any commercial office building. And we're looking at such a wide range of the user stories and user categories that we're able to effectively differentiate based on the number of those that are being hit across the building and the sophistication of the actual technological foundation that the landlord has delivered and designed. Thus far, we're very early in our delivery process here. As Phil mentioned, we launched a month ago. We're seeing that most of our buildings are really happy to target SmartScore certified, SmartScore silver. The industry, as I'm sure you know, is evolving, but there's still some hesitancy around investing very aggressively into smart technology. So for us, it's really valuable to see that landlords are comfortable with that. Just getting to a level of certified is a step in the right direction, and ensuring that they can actually start to look at potentially those higher levels of certification as a long-term roadmap and building improvement strategy, as they look to evolve and introduce new technology over time.
Yeah, to underscore what John said, this isn't meant to be a product or a certification that's easy to qualify for. We've certified over 3,000 buildings, and I assume maybe 5 to max 10% of our buildings this is relevant for. To qualify at the certified level or the silver level, it is truly a phenomenal achievement. And that's what a lot of our clients are shooting for, because cities aren't going to be littered with SmartScore certified buildings, just because, again, like, this stuff costs money. There's an investment, and you have to be willing to make that investment and spend that time. So that's essentially, and like, I'm going to talk on value real quick, but that's the meat of what we're looking at. And I know we're going to do Q&A after, but I actually think it might make sense to do some Q&A now on that part, given our audience on what we're looking at, if we want to keep it high level. Are there any questions as relates to what we're certifying and why, or any specifics that we might be able to help answer?
I have a question on the certification process. It sounds like there's not as many of you to cover the entire globe, so I'm wondering how that engagement works with your landlords, tenants, their contractors that might be doing some of the job. What does that look like from a certification process, and if there's some sort of training they need to go through in order to understand what they're looking for?
Yeah, good question. So essentially, we have the way our team is structured, we have dedicated client success teams that interface with all of our landlords, owners, and developers, and then an operations team that essentially serves as the evaluation arm of the different documentation and evidence that an owner provides for certification. So process is fairly simple. When a landlord signs up, we essentially onboard them, take them through what we're actually looking at from a scoring standpoint, take them through the evidence that we actually will need to see to allocate credit against all those categories that I just touched on, and then work with the project team essentially to obtain the evidence, track towards the different certification levels that the owner is targeting. So the process typically starts with a deep dive of their plans. So project team and owner submits, let's say it's a development project, they're submitting their Division 25 specification document to us along with all their schematics. My team is essentially deep diving into those plans, assessing the building against our criteria, and then coming back to the owner with a full view of exactly where they are today in terms of their technology level, and where they can get to from a higher scoring standpoint, potentially by making alterations to technology, potentially by just adding features. So for something like a tenant application, for instance, there's a lot that you can do with that out of the box. It's just a matter of prioritizing those different features that you want to deliver for tenants. So that's what we'll walk through from a scoring standpoint with the landlord. And then, the landlord and their project team essentially tracks towards finalizing certification based on additional rounds of documentation that's submitted to us.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about SmartScore. Is a SmartScore a number or a range like silver, gold, or platinum?
Yep. So so it's a 1 to 100 scoring system. So platinum is 90 to a building that scores 90 to 100. SmartScore Gold would be 77 to 89. SmartScore Silver would be 63 to 76, and SmartScore would be a 50 to a 62. So essentially, you're depending on the number of those user stories that a landlord is actually delivering, and again, the sophistication of that technological foundation, building will score one of those levels, hopefully, just falling into those different point ranges.
The market will only see the designation certified silver, gold, or platinum. They will not see the numerical score.
And my next question is, for example, there are a lot of parameters for building. Not all the parameters have to be on equal weightage. So for example, if visitor management is excellent and if energy wise it's scoring low, it is possible that one type of parameters is scoring very low and others scoring very high, and they still manage to get to, let's say, 92. So how do you take care of this? It meets a minimum requirement in each of these parameters.
Yeah, so each section of the scorecard is weighted differently. So part of the exercise that our Smart Council went through when working with us on scorecard development was essentially prioritizing what criteria was most important for a smart building. So something like being able to, access the ability to book a bike room in the building, bike space in the building, is obviously going to be scored much lower than the ability to visualize your energy breakdown by source, floor by floor throughout the building. So essentially the weighting of the scorecard is based on what is most important to the users. So not all the criteria is weighted equally.
And another question is, for example, let's say SmartScore card is available, and how frequently it is revalidated or retested, or how do you see the compliance over a period of time?
Yeah, so that's part of the purpose of our Smart Council and research advisors is that obviously this is a moving target, right? This technology is going to continue to rapidly evolve over time. We were having this conversation a year ago. We'd be talking probably about very different outcomes for end users. So we will be updating our scorecard continuously. Typically, we'll be doing light touch called versioning updates every 6 months, and then heavier updates yearly. And that again is just ensure that what we're delivering and what we're assessing from a SmartScore accreditation standpoint is relevant for tenants, relevant for those evolving expectations of the end user. So similar, our WiredScore product has the same process. Connectivity is constantly evolving. 2 years ago, 5G was a concept. Today, it's a reality. Our certification as a whole is rapidly evolving, as other certification bodies are as well.
If you don't mind, I'll ask you one more question. For example, different buildings, for example, if you're talking about data centers, if you are talking about manufacturing facility, if you are talking about, let's say, some other building like schools or colleges, they require different kind of weightage of each parameters. And does the SmartScore takes care of it?
No, so currently SmartScore is only available for commercial office buildings. So Phil touched on earlier in the call, we're expanding to multifamily in a month in North America. Essentially, every time we move to a new vertical, there is an adaptation of the scorecard and a full research development and product discovery process to ensure that what we're actually assessing is most relevant for that asset type. So currently, we don't have SmartScore available for schools, hospitality, data centers. It's solely available for commercial office.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Guys, is your target really, new construction? Is it remodels? I mean, like, what are your customers really looking to score at? I mean, is this something that they're looking at and implementing when they decide they want to upgrade their office space to attract tenants? Is this something that they're trying to go in all in, at the pre-construction phase? Give me an idea of where you guys see traction with this scoring system.
Yeah, I could take that, John. So for our launch a month ago, we had 70 buildings participate. globally. And honestly, it was a mix between new developments and existing occupied buildings. I'll give you an example. In New York City, which is where John and I are right now, there's an owner called Rudin Management Company. And if you know Rudin, they're the most tech-forward ownership group in all of New York, and probably one of the most in the entire country. They put 3 buildings forward for launch. They were all existing occupied buildings, but they're implementing smart strategies into their building. They're doing sophisticated things that they want to alert the marketplace to and use it as a competitive differentiator. Right, which like goes to what I was going to get to, which I could talk to now, which is just on the value side of things. Right, a lot of our owners work with us because they are trying to communicate a message to the marketplace that they have invested in their tenants being able to have a fantastic experience in their building, touchless technologies and smart booking systems and so on and so forth. Right, so they know they're investing a lot of money in this area. The next step is, okay, how do I get that out to the marketplace? So for them or owners like them, they're spending money in this arena, and they want to make sure that they can communicate it properly to use this as a way of not only attracting and retaining tenants, but as a way of alerting the marketplace that they're invested in the overall experience for their users. On the opposite side of the coin, we have new development projects, right? New development projects are great candidates for this because they're thinking out not only 1 or 2 years, but they're thinking out 5, 10 years plus, right? So they know all the things that we're looking at in SmartScore are going to be things that they're going to have to address down the line at some point. So they're looking to us for what's the roadmap. If I want to build my building, what's the roadmap that I need to be thinking about or taking into consideration to build my building to a smart standard? So it's a little bit of a hybrid. We're dealing with both owners who are already making these investments in their existing occupied buildings or are looking to redevelop or renovate their buildings with smart technologies, and they want to know, where do we start? And then new development projects where we generally get involved in like that DD stage. That's like generally where we come in to help them and advise them on the blueprint as to how they should be thinking about this. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay, so it's really, you guys are looking at that as you're providing that service at that DD phase for interested parties at that point.
Yeah, they're basically taking, we're sharing a playbook with them that's allowing them to design to specs that will ultimately land them to a place where they're able to qualify for the certification.
And not to be trite, but I'm just trying to figure out where you monetize what part of it as well. You know what I mean? Just
yeah, we monetize the way other certification monetize, right? So we charge building owners, based on their square footage, right? So they pay us a flat fee for the certification, different fee scales for existing occupied buildings versus new developments or redevelopments. But the owner pays us at the end of the day, and that's how it's a flat fee depending on size.
For that consultative service to like help them understand how they can score appropriately as well, or that's I guess what I was getting at.
That's all included in the certification. So they're like we're sensitive with using the word consultative. Like we're not consultants, but we're a support service for them to help them not only like obtain the certification, but we're arming them with the tools and the guidelines on how to do so and how to get there.
Thank you very much.
The ideal time for us to engage is DDs is great. What I'm sure everyone on this call has seen is that oftentimes this planning is happening very late. Oftentimes can happen as I have a building that's delivering in 3 months that is still figuring out what their tenant engagement application provider is going to look like and what access control looks like for their building. So ideally we're early, but we can be late. Our hope is that, by introducing this certification to the marketplace, we push that conversation a lot earlier in the process. We saw that happen with our WiredScore product. Traditionally, connectivity planning was happening, late, if at all, for a lot of building owners. And once we introduce the certification and actually we're, asking those questions around what their strategy around redundancy is for tenants and, what will be available for tenants from a connectivity standpoint earlier in the design process, it really kind of forces everyone's hand to be a little bit more proactive in approach. And then at the end of the day, buildings are more successful in implementing. So that's an exciting opportunity for us here because, as I'm sure you've all seen, this is happening at every stage of the development process.
The good news is I'm already seeing references to these types of standards in RFPs. but that's also indicative of a lot of the overwhelming aspects of smart buildings to owners in the market. How do you guys, John or Phil, John, it's nice to see you again. How do you guys differentiate your certification from others that are coming online as well? Thinking about TIA, thinking about a couple of the others.
Yeah, look, I think after doing this for 7.5 years, we've built a level of trust in the industry that we know this stuff better than anyone else out there in the world. No one has been in more buildings than us. No one has seen more than we have. No one is working with the number of clientele that we are. So I think over the past 7.5 years, we've developed trust from many of the largest real estate owners, if not in the US, the entire world, that we're the experts in this arena, and we've proved it time and again. So they're utilizing us now in terms of smart building. And by the way, like this SmartScore was a product of a lot of our clients coming to us and saying, hey, we're going above and beyond. We want something else. Can you help bring something to market that is underscoring all the smart things that we're doing with our buildings? So like we were getting poked and they wanted us to be the ones to develop it, right? Not anyone else. So look, I think it's a combination of the council that we put together, which is some of the smartest people in the design world, and again, some of the smartest real estate owners, and then the level of trust that we've built in the marketplace. I think people have seen the level of service that we're providing during design stages for owners, how we're assessing and auditing their buildings in a really smart way and providing them with the tools that they need. I think it's that trust and the breadth of our work so far that's allowed us to be the ones that we think are the owners of this industry.
John and Phil, is there an element of carbon neutrality in your scoring plan?
So the assessment is part of our sustainability section. We're not actually evaluating the performance there, but we're evaluating the ability to report on carbon neutrality and the utilization of different energy sources and making that information available to tenants.
And second question, is there, with technology is evolving so fast, is there an element of a baseline connectivity or interoperability that scores higher than some of the fringe elements of intelligence or smart aspects? How does that play in? Is there a boilerplate, for lack of a better term, for the scoring system?
Yeah, good question. There's minimum criteria by category. So there's specific minimum requirements that a building needs to hit, and interoperability is one of those. So ensuring that you do have an open platform in place to enable integration over time. We're not specifically evaluating the different systems of choice or anything like that. It's really just based on the outputs of that and the level of integration that's available for the users of the building. So yeah, at a baseline, we do have minimum criteria by category, but we aren't actually differentiating between the different products on market. It's really about the output.
Thank you.
Guys, I know we're a bit over time, but hopefully that was a valuable overview of WiredScore and our SmartScore product. Share a little bit about what we do. Look, I think the market's in a really interesting place right now. Right, tenants don't need to be in the office. It's a place where they're gonna want to be. And I think it's going to be a difference between the owners that could drive the best experiences and those buildings will ultimately thrive, and then the ones that can't, and I think those buildings will become obsolete over time. But I think we're at a really interesting point in the market right now, and smart is real. It hasn't been real over the years because people have just been talking about it and not knowing where to start. But we now believe that this is a real thing, especially with COVID. People are looking for touchless everything. They want to walk into the office building, not interface with anyone. They want to scan their phone in the reader to enter, use that to get up to the elevator and into their space. Like it's a really interesting time right now, which I think is a really interesting time for SmartScore. So hopefully this was valuable. If there are any other questions, obviously we're happy to take it. I realize we're a little over time, but we really appreciate your time today.
Phil, you're on the East Coast, so we appreciate you staying up late here after school for us. But
No
I
worries at all.
think this is all valuable for us, and as long as you're okay with answering a couple more questions, I'd love to keep people up. I had one question for you. So John, you'd mentioned that connectivity is one component in the smart building, and I'm wondering if you could talk about how that overlaps with WiredScore. I'm assuming it's not as rigorous, but what is the overlap, and are there people who are certifying WiredScore and smart building at the same time? What's the value of getting both of those?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, we look at WiredScore as a lead into smart. So the connectivity section is pulled out. We have a lot of clients that have gone through the WiredScore process, have a WiredScore certification, and are now pursuing SmartScore. So essentially, we are using the connectivity layout in the building to inform how we're evaluating the building for smart. So it's much simpler. It's much more baseline. It's, do you have choice of provider? Do you have redundancy? Do you have Wi-Fi available for tenants? Whereas WiredScore is a very, very in-depth review of that, full layer one technology stack in the building for digital connectivity. So, if an Amazon or a Google is coming to your building and looking to sign a lease, our scorecard for WiredScore is, rigorously looking at all those different subcomponents that will come up in that conversation. So everything from spare capacity for new services, dark fiber, backup power availability. Obviously, cellular infrastructure is very important today. So, for our landlords, the value in getting both is ensuring that, you're both foundationally setting yourself up for, really high demand connectivity users, but also from a technology standpoint, smart building standpoint, ensuring that that is translating down to, the employees and ensuring that they've got the technology and the features that will really differentiate the asset from their peers. And we do see a lot of our launch clients that actually ended up signing up for both for that reason. They really want to make sure that they were, not designing in any blind spots from a technology standpoint. And this is a really great way to do that, foundationally evaluating all that low voltage infrastructure coupled with smart building technology. Great. Any other questions?
Quick one for you. If somebody wants to kick the tires and see how they may use WiredScore and SmartScore in their endeavors, is there an easy way to access that, or how do we go about taking a look? Yeah, so we could share essentially an overview of the scorecard. It's more categorical than it is credit by credit. In terms of evaluating, the scorecard as a whole is our IP. So we only make that available to clients and to project teams. So that credit by credit evaluation process, is best served through the certification process as a whole. But if you want to take a stab at it or kick the tires, we've got an overview we can provide, and also just a list of questions that you can ask the owner or project team that many buildings we ask those questions to, and it might not be a right fit because they're not actually investing in technology in a way that will help them to obtain a certification. So we can share that with you. Yeah, our reach is becoming more and more broad, with property management and design teams, architects, manufacturers. It's a very broad group, and I would think there would be an advantage to being able to take a look at just a very baseline view, so we could share that with our members.
Yeah, we could send that over as a follow-up to the email to the invite.
Mhm.
Yes, and then we'll package that up with the recording from today as we send out a follow-up from the meeting here.
Yeah, happy to. And then, of course, anyone who has projects that they're working on or people that they're talking about that might have buildings that this could be relevant for, I'm a great point of contact, and can take them through the process or help them get signed up if this is something of interest for any projects that you or your team are working on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do that for both WiredScore and SmartScore?
Yeah.
Because I think from my perspective, being CommScope, I think the WiredScore portion would be more interesting to us as a company, just because of what we play in. But it seems like the SmartScore builds on top of the WiredScore. At least it seems like you can't have a very highly prescriptive WiredScore without or SmartScore without having a good WiredScore. It seems like you need to have one before to have the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's parts of SmartScore takes part of WiredScore into it, but not every piece of WiredScore is in SmartScore, right? So WiredScore is more in depth on tech and telecommunications. We take part of that into SmartScore, but not all of it.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
And you talk about putting together a scorecard for certifying master systems integrators. This is the request that we've gotten from MSI. So it wasn't. I wish I could have claimed credit for the idea, but there's a demand.
Yeah, it's the Wild West. We have it in Europe and a lot of our growth markets. We have an accreditation professional program. So we essentially similar to lead APs. We're looking at potentially rolling that out in North America later this year as well. So be sure to let your group know if that becomes a reality. That's the entire purpose, right? Is to ensure that everyone that's out there in the industry and in the ecosystem that's talking to landlords has a thorough understanding of exactly what the certification entails and all the sub criteria to speak to specifics.
I suppose that we can give a round of applause and let you guys get going. We're out of questions for you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you all, everyone.
Thank you all.
This is informative. We've talked about what we contribute to the community through putting scores together, and as we saw you guys had this, we said, all right, that problem's solved. Let's look at some of the other ones that we could be looking at. So that might be one of the things we would be looking at. Is I think what you're talking about would be getting other people who can run your scorecard system. We have kind of considered, could we be putting the criteria together to say this is what qualifies you as a master systems integrator versus you're a controls contractor who can maybe do some of the basics. How can we start stratifying that? So if at some point that's something you guys decide to look at, please keep this group in mind, and we might do the same as we're looking to try and tap some of your knowledge based on how we might put that together. Anything you can share with us that's not proprietary?
That's a great business idea, frankly.
Well, thank you all. Yeah, we appreciate it. We'll talk soon, and we'll send that that piece of collateral. So Brad, you could send that along.
Good, we'll do.
All right, thanks, guys.
Robbie, yeah, thank you. Robbie, is there anything you want to wrap us up with?
I don't know.
Why don't we do a preview of our next program? So we're working on laying some groundwork for a program on metadata tagging. So Project Haystack and several others. We're kind of idea that hasn't really been explored yet with the participants we have in mind is that we'd like to do a panel discussion and try and get some of these different scoring systems, get people together for them and talk through what the pros, cons are overall, and looking at getting that implemented, defining it, baselining it, I suppose. What is it? Why do you apply it? And then interesting to see if those folks all get along or have conflicting ideas based on the way they set up their own types of tagging ontologies. So more to come on that. That's kind of what we're thinking right now, don't hold us to it, because if we end up getting those folks that we want to meet with and they say, yeah, I'm not going to sit on the stage with that other person, we might pivot to somewhere else. Well building is another one of the topics that we've been working on trying to set something up for. And then the other piece is that Saturday will be end of August meeting. We're not quite sure where between now and then or our November meeting, we might be able to actually get together in person. But especially with that, the data tagging, that does lend itself well to a virtual meeting. So I think we'll be looking kind of in parallel. Are we able to get a Twin Cities based social hour scheduled again and be able to get out to one of the tap rooms or someplace that could be fun to be able to have an event. So that's what's coming on the program side. Well, Tom, do you have your gavel? Do you want to officially wrap us up?
I do. I just wanted to say that that we have pretty good bandwidth as far as receiving requests and information from members and potential members. And so don't think you have to hold back for volunteering for one of the committees. We've got plenty of room to take people in. You don't have to be shy about that. We will find a spot. Well, we're looking for a broad base of collaboration from members and potential members. So please join us if you have interest. We're interested in working together with you. So thank you for joining today. Have a pleasant rest of the week and weekend, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, guys.
Think so.
Take
Thanks a
care.
lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good seeing everybody.
Yeah.